The first time Clara heard about the hill folk, she was sitting around a flickering campfire at the base of the Blue Ridge Mountains. It was a humid summer night in late July, and the fireflies blinked lazily around her. The locals called them mountain lanterns, souls of the lost who wandered the woods. Clara, a travel vlogger from Chicago, laughed at the idea. She had driven all the way to Appalachia to film a documentary on forgotten mountain cultures and their folklore. But what she found there would never be uploaded online. Clara had always been fascinated by rural myths, the kind that blurred the line between truth and superstition. When she arrived in the small Virginia town of Hollows Bend, she instantly felt the eerie stillness that seemed to cling to everything. The locals were polite, but distant. Whenever she mentioned her interest in filming the old families who still lived deep in the hills, people changed the subject or muttered something about, "Best not going up there." At first, Clara assumed it was typical small-town secrecy. She'd seen it before, people not wanting outsiders digging into their business. But that night, sitting around the campfire with a few young locals, she asked directly, "Who exactly are the hill folk?" The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. One of the boys, maybe 19, nervously threw another log on the fire. A girl beside him, her face pale in the firelight, whispered, "They ain't people no more." Clara chuckled. "You mean like ghosts?" "No," the girl said, shaking her head. "Worse. They're what's left after people get taken by the mountain." The others refused to say more. Clara thought it was all small-town folklore, stories meant to scare tourists. But later that night, as she packed up her camera gear, an older man named Ephraim approached her. His face was deeply lined, his eyes gray and tired. He spoke quietly. "You don't want to go where they live, miss. Them hill folk, they ain't what God made." When she asked him to explain, he just turned and walked off into the dark. The next morning, Clara drove her Jeep up an old logging road that twisted into the hills. The map on her phone went blank after a few miles, and the road narrowed into little more than a dirt path. She filmed as she went, narrating cheerfully about, exploring the forgotten side of Appalachia. But her voice wavered when the woods grew unnaturally silent. Even the birds had gone quiet. After nearly 2 hours of driving, she came across a rusted metal gate. The sign hanging from it read, "Turn back. No trespass." She hesitated. She should have turned around then. But curiosity, her most dangerous trait, pushed her forward. She parked the Jeep, slung her camera bag over her shoulder, and began walking. The forest was dense and heavy with mist. The deeper she went, the colder it became. She noticed strange carvings on trees, spirals, eyes, and crude symbols made from sticks tied with twine. Some looked freshly made. Then she found something that made her stop cold, a small wooden doll nailed to a tree. Its face was carved into a crude grimace, its eyes gouged out. Clara whispered into her camera, "Local crafts. Possibly some kind of warding symbol." But even as she spoke, she felt like she was being watched. After another mile, she came across what looked like a small village, half a dozen old cabins in a clearing. The roofs sagged, the wood blackened with age. Smoke drifted lazily from one chimney. Someone still lived there. Clara's heart pounded with excitement. She turned on her camera and began filming as she approached the first cabin. Looks like the stories were true. People still live deep in the Appalachian hills. Let's see if they're friendly. She knocked. No answer. When she turned to leave, a voice rasped from inside. "Ain't safe out here." The door creaked open, revealing a woman, gaunt, pale, her hair white and tangled. She wore an old-fashioned dress that looked hand-stitched. Her eyes were milky, but they followed Clara with unsettling precision. I'm sorry," Clara stammered. "I'm filming a documentary. I didn't mean to intrude." The woman smiled, a slow, cracked smile that revealed blackened teeth. "You come looking for us," she whispered. "Now the mountain look back." Before Clara could respond, the woman slammed the door shut. That night, Clara camped near the edge of the clearing. She built a small fire, reviewed her footage, and spoke into the camera. "I found evidence of isolated mountain settlers, possibly families who've been here for generations without contact with the outside world." The woman seemed frightened, maybe even feral. She paused, frowning at a strange noise, a faint, rhythmic tapping. It came from the woods, echoing between the trees.
Tap, tap, tap.
Then came the whispering. At first, she thought it was the wind. But the words grew clear, soft, guttural voices murmuring in some dialect she didn't recognize. She grabbed her flashlight and shone it into the trees. Something moved thin, hunched figures darting between the trunks. Her pulse spiked. "Hello," she called out, trying to sound brave. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." No answer. Just the tapping. And then a low, wet laugh that made her skin crawl. She fled into her tent and zipped it shut. The whispering surrounded her all night. She didn't sleep. By morning, her fire was out and her camera was gone. Footprints circled her tent. Bare feet. Small. Too small for adults. She followed the tracks back toward the cabins, but the clearing was empty now. The cabins looked even older than before, windows shattered, doors hanging open. As she stepped closer, she realized what had changed. The smoke was gone. And the wood wasn't just old. It was rotted, falling apart. These cabins hadn't been lived in for decades. But she had seen smoke. She had spoken to that woman. Clara stumbled backward, panic flooding her veins. "No, no, no," she whispered. Then she saw movement inside the cabin, a shadow shifting past the window. She forced herself to look inside. The cabin was full of dolls. Dozens of them, hanging from the ceiling, nailed to the walls, sitting on the floor. Each one carved from wood, each one with its eyes gouged out. The air smelled of rot and smoke. And on the far wall something was carved into the wood. "We watch." Clara ran. She didn't stop until she reached her jeep. The forest seemed alive now, branches moving though there was no wind, whispers brushing past her ears. She jumped inside, slammed the door, and started the engine. But as she looked into the rearview mirror, her blood turned to ice. A figure stood at the edge of the trees. It was the old woman, but her face was wrong. Her mouth stretched too wide, her eyes glowed faintly white. Behind her, more shapes emerged, tall, thin figures with twisted limbs, their skin gray like bark. The hill folk. Clara floored the gas pedal and sped down the dirt road. The jeep bounced violently, branches scraping the sides. She could still hear them, laughing, whispering her name. By the time she reached Hollow's Bend, the sun was setting. She burst into the local diner, trembling and pale, demanding to know what she had seen. The people inside stared at her like she was mad. Ephraim appeared again from the corner booth. "You went up the hill," he said quietly. "Didn't I tell you not to?" "They're real," Clara gasped. "They're alive up there. Something's wrong with them." Ephraim just shook his head. "They ain't alive. Not anymore." That night, Clara stayed in a motel at the edge of town. She locked the door, closed the blinds, and sat shaking on the bed. She tried reviewing her footage, but the files were corrupted. Every video was static, except one. In that single clip, the camera faced her tent from the outside. She was asleep inside. And from the darkness, dozens of pale faces slowly emerged, surrounding the tent. Their eyes were hollow, their mouths moving silently. Then, one face leaned close to the lens. It was the old woman whispering, "Now you belong to the mountain." The video ended. The next morning, the motel manager found the room empty. Clara's camera was still on the bed, recording. The final seconds of the video showed the motel door slowly creaking open and a low voice whispering, "Come home." The jeep was found abandoned near the gate she'd crossed days earlier. No trace of Clara was ever discovered. Locals say if you drive up those hills at night, you'll sometimes see a figure standing by the roadside, a young woman with a camera, her eyes glowing white, whispering into the dark.